Elden Ring is the Dark Souls of open world games. Elden Ring is the latest From Software game and its most popular, and it seems everyone is awaiting its upcoming DLC Shadow of the Erdtree with utmost expectation. This is not, however, a video on the DLC, but the base game, and the majority of the script was written at release. At that moment, there were some discussions going on around the game. Among them, the one discussing how Elden Ring was a niche game because the new 100+ hours long open world game was hard, but 12 million copies sold in the first few weeks are definitely not niche. You could say that these days anything that's not Minecraft, Fortnite, Roblox, or some gacha/MMO/live service predatory game is niche, but Elden Ring is not the only example of a game that isn't any of those things and still surpassed sales expectations. Because there are a lot of factors in this game, a lot of stuff that just works, that was done right. So many things were done right that I'm gonna take my time listing them.
So many things, David.
There is, however, one thing that in my opinion Elden Ring has done so badly that it has completely ruined my experience playing it. And this is not an exaggeration to clickbait you or anything like that, though please subscribe. No, just like most of Miyazaki's games, the feeling Elden Ring has managed to inoculate me with is hatred. I vehemently hate this fucking game with all my heart, and yet I'm perfectly capable of admitting all of those aspects that had been done better than ever in From Software's history. Let's check it out. The main difference between Elden Ring and the rest of the Souls saga is that now the former has the surname of open world in its genre. Dark Souls 1 has a vertical world that connects a series of levels that camouflage this quality so that it feels like part of the world rather than a series of corridors with combat in between, which is one of my problems with the Souls saga, which solely consists of moving through levels and going to town with enemies. So while Dark Souls 1 has this interconnected vertical Metroidvania-like world, Elden Ring consists of a huge world that extends horizontally in such a massive way that the industry is going to have serious problems matching it. Sure, the world of Elden Ring has mountains and underground rivers, the biomes are actually interesting, have some verticality and are cool, but it's not the same approach as in the first Dark Souls, to the point that the areas, the biomes of Elden Ring are so poorly interconnected that they follow almost a straight line, so that you can't get into them before the game wants you to, or at least not by accident. However, this game lets you go to any zone you want from the start. Elden Ring is firmly an open world video game for better or for worse. The great thing about open world video games, and this is important for later, is that they give you the freedom to go wherever you wanna go. That's where the openness comes from. An open world game should let you explore with total freedom and should make that exploration very enjoyable. There's no point in building a huge open world if there's nothing to see nor do in it. The world of the open world must be one of, if not the main priority of the team. Exploration must be one of, if not the focus of these titles. It has to be done well. I've played many, way too many open world games and will continue to play them for this channel, sadly. We'll see some better, some worse, but the games that have truly said something to me world-wise are Fallout 4, The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, and Tears of the Kingdom. I'm happy to say Elden Ring is one of them, but I wouldn't say it's my favorite of the bunch world-wise. Nevertheless, what these titles all have in common is that the world is just so full of stuff, and wherever you go you'll find something interesting to see or do. Well, I'm qualified. Something interesting to see, because none of these games really place any juicy activities in their places of interest. Zelda has its camps of bokoblins to spar with, Fallout has its mutants to shoot, and Elden Ring has its enemies, bosses and mini-bosses to go to town with, inside various types of ruins and crumbling buildings, procedural-like dungeons, and the wonderful legacy dungeons. Before I talk about these dungeons, however, I want to mention that the majority of Elden Ring's places of interest are populated not only by basic enemies, not only do they usually also harbor the odd mini-boss which tend to be recycled, although with the massive amount of content in the game it's not that I'm complaining either, but also they tend to bear rewards for you. Some weapon, ring, spell, or the new Ashes of War. Interchangeable skills for weapons which develop this mechanic of Dark Souls 3, the weapon arts, resulting much more useful in this game, and that by changing them freely between most weapons you can also imbue that weapon and change the scaling without spending any rare stone, no finite resource. fingers. Weapon arts are one of the many mechanics that this game has introduced to Souls' combat, and there are so many different abilities that I won't even bother to cover them in depth. All the little gifts that this world hides in its corners are very useful for some build. Very few times I'd acquired an item and thought, who the hell would be interested in this junk? However, the items that are most useful for all builds and all types of players are the ones that From Software has improved on the most, the Estus flasks. Since Dark Souls 1, the team has been leaving upgrades for your healing items scattered around the world, but frankly good luck finding them, especially in Dark Souls 1 and 3, because Miyazaki has this thing for hiding the most valuable treasures in the most hidden corners, and above all because all the goodies look the same. You have no way to look for the Estus flask fragments or the Firekeeper souls, beyond combing absolutely all the game area and praying to the two fingers, or I don't know, crossing them, that you hadn't missed a fucking fake wall. Elden Ring has knocked it out of the park, and now the flask fragments are in these little golden trees, which is true that you can't locate them from the map, you have to look for them with your eyes, but at least now you know where not to look. The improvements to the amount of healing of these vials can be found in the Churches of Marika, the goddess and martyr of the lore of the game created by George R.R. Martin. A few hours before the end game, struggling against a boss that I couldn't possibly beat and that we'll talk about later, I said to myself, I'm going to find the last upgrade I need for the Estus, and I started combing the map looking for some ruined structure I hadn't visited. I found Bloodborne's procedural-like dungeons, which we'll talk about now, and finally one of the Churches of Marika that I hadn't visited. Having more control than ever over the upgrades of the Estus is goddamn wonderful, and I have nothing but congratulations for the studio, because among other things this makes the game easier, but talking about how exploration facilitates combat in the saga comes later. What comes now is what is almost the only element that this game has taken from Bloodborne, the Chalice dungeons. Little to say about the procedural-like dungeons in Elden Ring, beyond the fact that they are so forgettable that I've dubbed them procedural-like, meaning it feels like they are made by an algorithm and not a veteran designer. I haven't found them offensively bad, far from it, because of something I repeat from before. I complain about recycled content when there's only recycled content. It's like I don't count it in the bar, I only count new content, and Elden Ring has more than enough of it. It could be argued, and in fact I argue, that the less repetition, the less filler any work has, the better, since people, adults particularly, have limited time and filler is about wasting our time. Months before Elden Ring's release, the gamer discourse was about how Dying Light 2 was so wrong in asking its players to sink 500 hours to complete it, but then Miyazaki does literally the same and everyone celebrates that completing his game requires 100. Although what I would say in defense of the Japanese CEO is that at no time the content of Elden Ring has been as boring, scarce, and directly non-existent as in, for example, Fallout 76. Perhaps due to the fact that Elden Ring does not belong to one of the worst genres of the video game industry, the MMORPG. Where I would say it has crossed this line of content so sparse that its filler has been with the mines, small dungeons just as forgettable as their procedural-like sisters, but instead coming from Demon Souls instead of Bloodborne. It's as if Miyazaki had taken the Stonefang tunnel, multiplied by 2, chopped it into little pieces and spanned it all over the map. We're talking about 1/5 of the amount of content Demons had just for these crappy little dungeons. Imagine how massive Elden Ring is. Following the philosophy of Estus' upgrades, these dungeons have very specific purposes. To Demons' mines you go to get upgrades for your weapons, while to procedural-like dungeons you go to get upgrades for your spirits. But Manny, what spirits do you mean? Well, for Elden Ring it wasn't enough releasing a month after Pokemon Legends Arceus and giving it quite a run for its money in terms of graphic quality and level of care and detail in general, but it even included Pokemons in the game to finish humiliating the 3 poor devs who work at Game Freak. Yes, Elden Ring lets you quote-unquote capture and summon the monsters that attack you to fight by your side. Meet colorful characters like Conrad the Jellyfish or Hunter the Pumpkin Man, and make him smash and murder his own while you watch from afar and yell at him in frustration like a bad father at his son's football games. For crying out loud, Hunter, you fucking blind, or will you manage your goddamn stamina? Any chance we'll see a parry in the next 5 to 10 business days? You have no idea how much fun I found the Pokemon mechanics to be whenever I've used them, and how sorry I've been to have ignored them for most of the time because that's easy, bro, that's not how real gamers play. But now's not the time to talk about real gamers and ignoring mechanics. Unlike me, Elden Ring has not ignored mechanics from previous games. In fact, it's full of them. From Demon's Souls, apart from having copied the Stonefang Tunnel and frankly also Boletaria for the first Legacy dungeon, it has taken the mana bar, which I think has only been in Demons and Dark Souls 3, I'm not sure because real gamers don't play casters, that's easy mode. And more strikingly, it has taken the loading screens, in which important places and characters that you will meet throughout your adventure appear. You could say that it has also taken inspiration from having a boss give you the beating of your life at the beginning of the game, and having a Santa Santorum, a nexus, a base of operations physically removed from the levels you traverse where many of the NPCs hang out. Patches is also in Elden Ring, which I guess also counts. And then there's this general philosophy that enemies give an absurdly low amount of souls that has no correlation to the area they're in, the point in the game where you're supposed to spar with them, and the difficulty of the baggers themselves. You can perfectly beat an enemy that one-shots or two-shots you and discover after several Estus flasks spent that your reward is a 20th of a level. So yeah, super excited to go for the remaining 19. Dog. Dark Souls 1 has been the source of inspiration for mechanics such as being able to level up in any bonfire. Hooray! It was about time, goddammit. And also the one about progressively needing more and more Titanite upgrade stones to empower a weapon until you move to the next tier of stones. While in Dark Souls 1 weapons went up to level 15, now in Elden Ring they reach level 25. I wonder if the DLC Shadows of the Erdtree will change that. Dark Souls 2's additions are the most interesting, perhaps due to the fact that its director Yui Tanimura is there at the helm along with Miyazaki. Unfortunately, the bonfire aesthetics are not back, as they will be very difficult to implement in an open world game like Elden Ring, especially in areas where there are several graces, several bonfires crowded together. The ones that have returned, however, are the Pharos' stones, another forgotten one of the good mechanics of Dark Souls 2, which yes, it has them. Now we have imp statues where we put in stone sword keys to unlock new dungeons, restricted areas, or very useful items. In Dark Souls 2, some of these stones had tremendously relevant effects, such as illuminating No Man's Wharf, and it's a shame that in Elden Ring they didn't reach that level. But the fact that they implemented Pharos' stones in some way, it's quite a win in my book. Another Dark Souls 2 mechanic which has been a hell of an addition in Elden Ring is dual wielding. You can equip two weapons of the same type, one on each hand, and their moveset will be upgraded, allowing you to wield both simultaneously as long as your attributes allow you to wield each of them. It's not only that Elden Ring has polished the dual wielding of Dark Souls 2, making everything more automatic and more smooth, that the dual movesets are more polished and more varied, but it's that the dual wielding has been what allowed me to kill the most infamous boss of the game, and it has made the endgame much more fun for me. Dual wielding is without a doubt the most fun way to play in my opinion, which doesn't mean that Elden Ring hasn't managed to make other strategies just as effective. I don't know how they did it, but it's a marvel. We'll talk about this in the combat section. Dark Souls 2's additions, as you can see, are the best by far, and the following is no exception. The fucking UI disappears automatically. This way you don't have color bars and shit interfering between you and the game, and it's wonderful. Except for the fucking compass. That one is like death and taxes, there's no escaping it, even though it hardly serves any purpose, because you can put your own marks on the map, Breath of the Wild style, and you see them physically, you can't miss it. And, you know, just let me remove the fucking compass from my screen. How else would you know where your souls are located? You wouldn't know, because in fact it doesn't make any sense for your souls to remain where you died. We'll talk about it later. But first, to finish with Dark Souls 2, that was the game that invented the idea of increasing the amount of Estus you have finding Estus flask fragments in the world. From Bloodborne, Elden Ring found inspiration and took the Chalice dungeons, which frankly there was no shortage of amazing features in Bloodborne to take, and they went with the procedural dungeons. And also the patrolling enemies who aren't static, standing still in T-pose waiting for you to come and kill them. You could say that the fact that the Erdtree changes its state as the story progresses is inspired by the Night of the Hunt in Jarnam, but beyond that the main thing is the Chalice dungeons. From Dark Souls 3 they've brought the weapon arts as I explained before, but not only. I present to you the armor and defense system of Dark Souls 3, in which in my opinion they screwed up a system that already worked perfectly in Dark Souls 2 and in which you could perfectly make a tank build. When I completed Dark Souls 3 for the first time I did it with a tank build and I ate exactly the same damage being in heavy armor than naked. This system does not work. It does not work as as I would like. I do not notice the fucking difference until you work with damage reduction numbers of more than 40%, which is what I ended up doing in Elden Ring, and I'm glad I managed to make it work because I got really angry with Dark Souls 3 for refusing to accept my build. As a quick explanation, here's the system. On the one hand, you have defense, a number that increases only and exclusively when you level up. This is a brilliant mechanic that goes back to Demon Souls. If you're having a hard time with the game, you just need to grind and grind until you reach a point where the enemies do so little damage that they don't pose a problem. Defense does not exactly work as a flat number that you subtract from the flat number of the hit you take, like in Zelda Tears of the Kingdom, but let's leave it at that, because there's a super complicated tier system that's beside the point. Damage reduction is a percentage that depends on your armor, but it's so small a percentage, it has so little effect that I've spent half of Elden Ring with negative reduction, that is, increasing the damage I received from the buggers, and I didn't even notice it. That is to say, putting on armor didn't seem to have any visible effect on the amount of damage I was taking, which was exaggeratedly high. But I gotta give it to Elden Ring. As I said, at the end of the game I managed to get the reduction to more than 40% with a ring and Radahn's armor, and the reduction was noticeable. They finally did the amount of damage that they had to do to me and not the bullshit levels I was receiving before. And speaking of that, my favorite detail of Dark Souls 3, the design school of all the enemies one-shot you. 40 points in vitality is absolutely mandatory, and if you don't have those points there, don't even bother playing. What a wonderful RPG, Dark Souls 3. You fuck up the tanks and force me to keep my vitality at 40. So many options.
So many things.
Sekiro is a wonderful game that I also hate and which I've script written about. Perchance I'll make a video about it one day. From the Shinobi game, Elden Ring has copied the jump, which is a wonderful addition not only for combat but for a saga that insists on putting platforming segments in their games, but without allowing you to jump so far. The jumping, as I said, opens up a lot of possibilities in combat. We will explore them later. The other mechanic they adapted was the Shinobi protagonist's ability to run infinitely. In Elden Ring, a compromise has been reached in which running in combat consumes stamina but not outside of it, so you can move around a bit quicker, which is especially useful in areas when you can't use your horse torrent. Some players may not have noticed, but Elden Ring has an adapted version of Sekiro's stance bar. Only here is hidden, and the only reasonable way to make it go up is with heavy attacks from heavy weapons, which will eventually result in the boss getting into a vulnerable position that you can punish. As long as Miyazaki hasn't put that enemy on a staircase so that they clip through the terrain and bury their head underground or into a wall, then you are screwed, which is the great philosophical thesis of the Elden Ring school of thought. Another thing I'm going to say that Elden Ring takes from Sekiro, which isn't true, is the composer, one of them, the music. Although this has many nuances, and as always, you gotta wait. And finally, I've left the best for last. Elden Ring adopts to some extent the mechanics of losing your souls from Sekiro, in which you lost half of them every time you died. I can confidently say that Elden Ring not only has the worst soul loss system in the series, but it's also the most annoying, the one that screws the player the most. In Elden Ring, your souls remain where you perished, but sometimes, in one particular legacy dungeons, you will find a reduced amount, 70% to be exact, of your souls, because a motherfucker stole it from you. Why is this the worst system in the series? To answer that question, let me ask you another one. You've been exploring a while, you've found cool items, defeated many enemies, and accumulated enough souls to level up thrice. And then you get killed because of course you would. You were in a higher level area that you should have been, hence the obscene amount of souls you got. The nearest site of grace is quite far away. What do? A. I go back for my souls even though it was an area that is not suitable for me by level, perhaps losing them again and getting into this infinite loop of being forced by this system to go to a dangerous place instead of encouraging me to explore, which is what a fucking open world game is supposed to be about. Yeah, don't answer, the correct one was A. This system encourages you to go back to where you died, but where you died was full of enemies that killed you, probably because they were stronger than you, and if I'm a game that wants to encourage exploration instead of going back again and again to the place you ain't supposed to go to, then I shouldn't give you a very strong reason to go back.
We have to go back!
A reason that won't ever leave your fucking compass until you pick them up or die again. Why is this system a mistake? Because in the one place where it made sense for souls to stay where you died, the legacy dungeons, well, the game decides that in one of them, fuck you, and has this motherfucker steal 30% of them, because fuck you. Because this is Dark Souls, a niche saga for a small small sector of players looking for a very demanding experience. One of the few arguments for constantly putting the compass in your face is that otherwise you can't know where your souls are, but you shouldn't know where your souls are because your souls shouldn't be awaiting for you in the open world. Inside the dungeons we never needed a compass to locate them. Sure as hell don't need it now. I'll say it again. If Elden Ring wanted to encourage you to explore, it should have used Sekiro's system for the open world and Dark Souls' system for the dungeons, not the fucking aberration that's in the game right now. But Manny, you're exaggerating, it's not that serious. And you're right, it's not that bad. But far as I'm concerned, it is the worst Souls recovery system in the saga and I wanted to mention it. This game has too many fans for me to pull any punches. What would also be the worst in the saga if it wasn't for the disastrous PC port of Dark Souls 1 is the disastrous PC port of Elden Ring, in which at release the fucking bloodstains didn't work, you had constant FPS drops, sometimes the GPU was not used for some reason, and more importantly you couldn't run the game with a powerful computer in high graphics quality or you risked having black bars as I had. I spent like 60 hours of gameplay at 1080p medium quality when I usually play at 2K and Ultra. That's the computer I have and that was the situation during the first days. I should also say that this was fixed quickly, but from a lack of trust in the game and from I did not try to improve the graphics until the last hours of play, and I must say that now is fine. I can play in 2K and high, so I have to give it to them. They corrected the mess that was the PC port at launch. I mean, come on, 11 years passed since the release of Dark Souls 1 and it seems like From Software still doesn't even know what a computer is. Another thing that's a mess in my subjective opinion is Elden Ring's music, precisely because we come from Sekiro and its composer is a beast. Let's take a quick look at the musical landscape of the Souls saga. Demons was composed by Shunsuke Kida, who has not been seen again in the saga. The music of the three Dark Soulses was directed by Motoi Sakuraba, one of the most prolific composers in the video game industry, who for example has composed the music of almost every Tales of. Apparently he's Namco's slave. When you hear on Spotify the blim blim blon, well, now you know who composed it. Along with Sakuraba, from Dark Souls 2 onwards will join Yuka Kitamura, who seems to have stayed as From Software's in-house composer, which is fine by me because her work in Sekiro is absolutely spectacular, and since there isn't a Sekiro video in my channel yet, I want to talk about it here to reach the 10-minute mark for this video, haha. It's not only that Sekiro's music is very well composed, very melodic and beautiful to listen to, which is not a minor detail at all. Not everyone can make beautiful melodies. I'm looking at you, Dragon Quest. But Sekiro's instrumentation is, well, it's very special, as the game has a very specific setting in this feudal Japan in the Sengoku period, full of demons, millipedes and immortal apes, and the music understandably uses a lot of traditional Japanese instruments that give it a very special touch. It's got a lot of Japanese flute, shinobue, it's full of Japanese percussion, taiko drums, and it's kind of like... Most of the acoustic instruments that were recorded rather than computer produced were played by Kitamura herself, who is a string player, and it shows, because in the vast majority of her works the strings and in particular the cello have a very strong presence. The problem with a composer like that who is tasked to compose European medieval fantasy music is that she's going to take a fucking orchestra and compose the same fucking music that we've been doing in Europe for the last 200 years with Beethoven. And if I never hear a string instrument again except for a double bass played pizzicato to the rhythm of a walking blues, I'm gonna die a happy man. No, but it sounds super epic. No, it fucking doesn't. From now on, orchestras are banned and forbidden. Everybody throw your violins and cellos out the window. What I do say more seriously is that the choice of instruments for a soundtrack will determine the timbre of the soundtrack and much of its personality. Compare this to Monkey Island's soundtrack, whose main instruments is the marimba, and then you've got trombones and xylophones and steel drums, and I bet half of those instruments you don't even know what they are, and rightly so, because we're too busy with fucking string quartets and fucking orchestras, and the result is a bunch of soundtracks and pieces for movies, shows, games and whatnot that all sound the fucking same. And unfortunately, with a couple of exceptions, Elden Ring's music is precisely this. I kinda need a soundtrack for the in the background for when I explore the lands between. How about a fucking cello? How about a fucking cello? If I hear Elden Ring's cello one more time, I swear to God! There is one tremendous exception in Elden Ring's soundtrack for me, which is the, spoiler alert, I fucking guess, the final boss of the base game, the Elden Beast, a very unpopular fight because, let's face it, it's not fun. If it's not fun, why bother? But it has a wonderful atmosphere that is accentuated by the harp and the vocals, the soprano soloist, who may have been recorded by Yuka Kitamura herself, seeing how she claims to have sung and played the strings in Sekiro. And it's very appropriate that a soprano singer is the lead instrument in this track, because if you read the description of the items she drops on the feed, you find out that the monster is kinda Queen Marika herself, and it's really cool that there's a soprano singing, because you could interpret all this like it's Queen Marika herself doing the singing. Yes, this track has strings, but what do you want me to say? It doesn't sound like the same old fucking thing, which is unfortunately the impression I have of the Elden Ring soundtrack. It's not bad, not at all, but it just sounds like the same old shit, orchestra and choir, which is a sound that I particularly don't like at all. I insist, within that, it's very good. In fact, I like it more than the soundtrack of any Dark Souls, which isn't saying much, by the way. And some of the bosses, having been stuck with them for so many hours, I know their fucking themes by heart. Motoi Sakuraba is a composer I actually like. I've heard albums of his. He has this experimental vibe using his characteristic polyrhythmia and uneven and crazy time signatures. I just would have liked to see more of his polyrhythmic jazz rock shit instead of fucking orchestra, for the fanbase to say that the fucking Ornstein and Smoke battle theme is the greatest soundtrack ever created. I'm a level with ya, I cannot distinguish any Dark Souls boss theme, except for the Lord of Cinder theme, because of the blim blim blom meme. So, there are still things I want to say about exploration. We've talked about how Elden Ring places rewards all over the place and how those rewards vary depending on where they are found, which is pretty cool. Another thing that they depend on, not so much the rewards themselves, but the enemies and NPCs you encounter, is the time of day when you encounter them. What I mean is, now we have day and night cycles in the Souls saga. This is bonkers. There are special enemies that only come out at night, other enemies that during the day are normal people who sell you stuff, and at night are very dangerous enemies to whom you sell your body so they can shove their blades up your ass. The fact that this happens sometimes makes me wonder how many of these events I've missed by playing during the day, and makes me see the world of Elden Ring as more massive and more full of secrets than I believed it to be. And I'm telling you, I believed it to be quite massive and quite full of secrets, especially considering the huge amount of secret areas, many of which I have not discovered because I have not been lucky enough to have a friend tell me about them. This, in fact, has happened to me to the nth power with the fucking quest lines of the fucking NPCs. If it were up to me, I wouldn't have completed a single one of them, which is a shame with quests like the one about feeding human eyes to a blind maiden that you end up killing, or the one about the best character in the game, No, the Dung Eater, whose quest consists of, "Hey you dumb fuck, how about you release my physical body so I can kill you and defy your corpse?" Okay, and you fight, and you beat him. "Oh shit, you're sure strong. How about you dedicate your existence to torturing and defiling me by putting things in my body until I can't do all the same to all the lands between, spreading a horrible plague that will scorch generations." Okay. Even with such an appetizing disguise, the quests in these Souls hero games, and Elden Ring is no exception, consist of, "I need an item to get out of the hole," or "Give this item to this other person," or "Another settlement sent war, they need our help, I'll mark it on your map." Oh, how cool is it when video games put things on our maps and we have to go to a specific point to get a specific thing, and we spend the day looking at the minimap and or the compass instead of the game, eh? Thank goodness we have real video games like Elden Ring where this doesn't happen. Do you know what game doesn't mark things on the map? Yes, Minecraft! Elden Ring is now Minecraft! This game has crafting and I don't know why, but I think it's kinda cool, really. Usually the combo of open world plus scrap to collect plus crafting system to create things you need from the scrap just works, and that's why you see it so much in these open world games. As I was saying before, Elden Ring is firmly an open world game, not only because of its open worldness, but because there are a number of non-hostile creatures, animals, that you get resources from if you kill them. What you also get if you kill them is my deep contempt, for there is nothing I hate more in this life than animal abuse. If you kill animals in the lands between, they will give you raw materials to craft things with. The things you can craft range from consumable items to cure poison, for example, to resins to imbue your weapon. I haven't used the crafting system much because I was a bit lazy, it overwhelmed me a bit, but I regret it a lot because I'm sure it's a system with enough depth for a character to focus their build on it and dedicate themselves to throwing bombs and putting on perfumes, which are awesome by the way, and I haven't used them either, and I regret it a lot. Although some of these materials can be obtained in legacy dungeons, most of them are scattered throughout the open world itself. It's a marvel the contrast going on between the legacy dungeons and the open world. Alternating between them, you get a rhythm of gameplay in which I have never been bored of either styles, design philosophies. I remember decades ago playing the Legend of Zelda games as they came out and always thinking the same thing. Fuck man, another dungeon? Can't I just keep exploring, riding around Hyrule? Why do I have to get into solving cheesy puzzles now? Elden Ring literally has the structure of a Zelda game in this regard, with a world that connects dungeons, but it didn't make me wanna put a gun inside my mouth every time I entered one of its very well designed dungeons. That happened every time I fought an enemy.
お前はもう死んでいる。何?
Legacy dungeons, apart from being full of enemies, are also very well designed, using verticality and forcing you to go through them not only from front to back, but from top to bottom, being very creative when using their scenarios, as for example in the capital, where the stuffed body of a giant dragon that once attacked the city is now the only way to progress, or the roots of the Erdtree, which besides being decoration are also the right path you must go through to reach the end of a level. When it's not obvious in which direction you have to advance, when the path is full of surprises, exploration is much cooler. Even more so when you keep unlocking shortcuts that link some part of a level with others, and the fucking Pharos' stones that further enhance the few dungeons in which they appear. I'm thinking mainly of Stormveil Castle. Another thing that was said about these dungeons, and that is basically only true in the castle, is that you can enter them via more than one route, which on paper is absolutely spectacular, and the castle proves that in practice it's pretty cool, but it's a shame that neither the Caria Manor, nor Castle Morn, nor Castle Sol, nor the Erdtree have any alternative entrance that I know of. What they do have, however, is lots and lots of paths, nooks and crannies and secrets to discover, which is always a delight. Having fewer of these levels, you can tell that they've put a lot of work into them, and each one is a marvel worthy of its own DLC, which up until now have usually consisted of somewhat smaller areas made up of 2 or 3 interconnected levels that are a marvel to explore. One in particular that the capital has reminded me a lot was the Ringed City. I have nothing but words of congratulations for From's level designers, especially because of this. They've focused on getting a few areas right. Spiel is actually a big fat lie, because to say that Elden Ring's small, that it is quality over quantity, is a lie so big that it would make Pinocchio's nose so long that it would reach such far reaches of the galaxy that we would make contact with intelligent life, and a couple of millennia from now we would have albinaurics such as these colonizing Earth. You can complete the game by ignoring the wonderful open world and focusing on rushing the wonderful legacy dungeons, but be aware that the game is not balanced for this. Miyazaki expects that before accessing Boletaria Castle 2 Electric Boogaloo, you will have explored much of the starting area and the Weeping Peninsula, which is a spectacular area name and source of memes used to mock whiners like me who complain about the game's difficulty. Luckily, this difficulty doesn't boil down to green enemy, I can fight it, or red enemy, if he breathes near me, I'm done, as in many other open world games. As I will say in my Witcher 3 video, which is gonna be a while, I do not enjoy open worlds with a linear structure and a rigid progression that prevents the player from exploring the open world freely, thus defeating the purpose of the open world as we discussed previously. Elden Ring's enemies have a very specific level of strength, hit points, aggression and difficulty, which makes it very difficult for you to take them out unless you have a high enough leveled character and equipment. This could lead to, and indeed led to, a debate about whether this design philosophy is right for an open world. I mean, say you've just started and want to explore Caelid, because it's not that far away either from the starting area. Well, the game says, no, fuck you, it's not that time yet, go somewhere else to grind. And this is a bit frustrating, because it also goes against the freedom of the open world. There was an argument years ago, something along the lines of, if I explore everything, I become so strong that no enemy can even cough at me. There should be a scaling system so that all enemies have a level similar to yours for you to be able to fight them on equal terms. And when this feature is proposed as an optional feature, then yeah, great. But let's pretend not for the sake of argument and talk about how a level scaling, while a priori may seem like a good alternative since it solves the problem of vetoing areas of the game through the difficulty of their enemies, it, however, in return completely destroys the game progression. Let me explain. Do you know which open world games scale their difficulty so that the enemies are always equal or even stronger than you? Yes, Bethesda games. Oblivion, Fallout 3, Skyrim, not Fallout 4, Fallout 4 does it right, and Fallout 76, my old friend. Video games where if you level up suboptimally because you might not feel like expending 10 levels in a row leveling up damage because you're looking forward to a specific set of skills, or because you have no idea how badly Oblivion's leveling system works, you can perfectly make it so compared to the rest of the enemies your character becomes weaker and weaker with each level up, which is not only unacceptable, it's absurd to the point of punishing the game designer who created that system for a whole year without making video games. The concept of leveling up in video games is not something that should be taken for granted. As every other aspect of design, there should be a reason for it to exist, but why do we level up in video games? We level up because that brings a sense of progress. We level up to get stronger. If enemies scale with us and instead of getting stronger we get weaker and weaker or stay still, then there is no point in leveling up. If the game is a straight line where the enemies we are going to fight are balanced to die in 2 shots to the head and they are going to die from those 2 shots regardless of whether you are both level 500 or level 5, then there is no point in leveling up at all. Unless of course we are discussing something along the lines of Prey, rest in peace Arcane Austin, that you unlock new shit to do with each level up. Horizontal progression, ladies and gentlemen. But the majority of games don't do that, instead content with making a line go up, and while great for crypto bros and shark mentality bros, needs a reason to exist. Throwing vertical progression onto a game and calling it a day is stupid. The only scenario where it makes sense to level up vertically is when there are enemies that are initially too strong for us and after leveling up we can best them because of how far our character has progressed. I can't stress the character thing enough. Leveling up improves our avatar. It doesn't make us dodge more attacks, that's gaining skill as a player or familiarizing yourself with the mechanics of combat, like a drunken father's kid learning his attack patterns late at night. Sekiro was a game that had some progression, but frankly it didn't need any. They could have given the late bosses fewer HP and less damage, taking away the life and damage upgrades from you, and it would be an identical game. That aside, Sekiro is purely a skill-based game, so the only thing you have to do when a boss takes off his scared Yakuza style in front of you is learn how to defeat it. Some people prefer purely skill-based games, that is, action games, while others prefer the strategy of leveling up your character, but mind you, leveling up in a specific way, planning a build with which to face the game's challenges. If leveling up has no decisions whatsoever and every player levels up in the same way, then there is no point in leveling up. You know me, I love RPGs and I love planning builds. In fact, it wasn't until I found the right build that I was able to complete Elden Ring at release without breaking a sweat. We'll talk later about the right build. Returning to the philosophy of enemy scaling, killing the progression of the open world, or the fixed levels of the monsters, I want to insist on the complete polar opposite of Bethesda's games, which is that of The Witcher 3 or Assassin's Creed, that of the game master who does not want you to do something so vehemently that they will force the stats of the enemies to one-shot you, even if they are fucking common bore. There's no progression here, there's no get stronger to defeat this enemy that's giving me trouble. There's this enemy's color is red, turn the fuck away. I've said it before, but I'll say it again. This also blows the progression system because you don't get stronger to overcome a challenge, you just go where the game says in an environment that screams at you the freedom you have to do whatever you want, but that in reality is nothing more than a glorified hallway. The open world makes absolutely no sense in games that are so clear about where they want you to go at all times, which is why these should ditch their open world, ditch their leveling and experience system, and instead be narrative adventures like Uncharted. If you're going to do something, do it right or don't even bother. Elden Ring is not very different from this school of games, as it has enemies that clearly have an appropriate level to face them, but the game doesn't force you to lose. It doesn't manipulate the stats of the monsters to convince you to go elsewhere. Instead, it lets you do whatever you want, knowing that if you want to overcome its challenges, you will have to do what the game wants you to do, or I guess get good. So so fucking cringe, that line. A similar experience that comes to mind is Fallout New Vegas, with its famous or infamous routes to the Strip, full of enemies that will tear you apart if you try to go through them at the beginning of the game to shortcut your way to the glowing city. This gives you plenty of reasons to get stronger and come back later to tear the Cazadores and Deathclaws a new asshole. Or not, because there are fucking chats like me, for example, that hide like champions and manage to shortcut, skip half the game and then get away with it, something that the game allows you to do and that feels great. This, along with everything scaling, was the only way to make open worlds until Breath of the Wild arrived with kind of the only revolutionary thing about it, which is its progression recipe. Enemies with different and increasingly complicated variants which populates the world as you advance. The game scales with you, but it does so with clear-colored casts for each enemy, and most importantly, the basic enemies still appear in the game, allowing you to assert yourself against the bugger that used to give you so much trouble and now it's their turn to get down on all fours. You can feel the progression as long as there is a reference point, an enemy that stays static, anchored. If all the enemies go up with you, you're not progressing, your leveling system will have no progression and therefore no reason to exist. And that's why Elden Ring does it very, very badly by taking you by the hand to the castle of the cock you're gonna eat as soon as you first mark it at the very beginning of the game. Remember the one about playing Elden Ring by rushing through legacy dungeons as if this was a traditional Souls game? Well, Margit the Fell Omen is here to show you how bad an idea that is. You start the game, you have the aggressive sentinel to give you the beating of your life and teach you, quote-unquote, to get away and come back when you're stronger. A shame about this enemy is that if you come back at an appropriate level, the amount of soul skill drop will be a fucking joke, but as I said before, this happens throughout the entire game. If you follow the obvious straight line with which the game leads you by the hand like a doting parent to your next objective, you solve your maidenlessness, you unlock the waifu, and she tells you to go to the castle without warning you about how fucked up it's going to be and how unprepared you are. You get into the castle and meet Margit, who after flexing how great his voice actor is, he and most of the bosses, shoves his stick up your ass and out your mouth. Give me some time and we'll talk about why. At base level, it's practically impossible for you to get past Margit. Again, it's not impossible, especially if you use the tools the game gives you, summoning NPCs, PCs, and Pokemons. I myself insisted and headbutted myself against Margit without using any of these tools and at the starting level, because apparently I have something to prove to someone and I'm not a real gamer if I don't do it the right way. But hey, the upside of this is that it proved that Margit can go down even if you're underleveled. But this is not normal. What's normal is this boss pounding you so hard that your desire to search for the Elden Ring wanes and fades away like the first flame or something like that. I've heard YouTubers saying that Margit is a wonderful teacher who is there to teach you that you have to explore the world and get stronger when an enemy is too difficult. That if you explore you can level up, get Pokemons to summon, and run into the stellar appearance of Patches the Hyena, who sells you an item that binds Margit to the ground. My question to these people is, how exactly does Margit teach you this? By being difficult? Really, now in the series whose marketing is all about how difficult it is, a difficult enemy means go away? Since fucking when? Not only does Margit not teach you shit, but the game knowingly sets you up and knowingly takes you to a place that is way above your level without warning you at all, just to fuck you over. The enemy levels are designed for you to explore the starting zone and the Crying Peninsula, and if you trust Miyazaki, listen to the game and go to the fucking castle, you have fucked up the game, those starting zones in particular. All the enemies you encounter there after Margit you're gonna eat for breakfast, while the fucking castle is gonna be a nightmare. You could have the experience of everything being at the perfect point of challenge, neither frustrating nor boring, the flow described in Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi's acclaimed book. Or can the game set you up and fuck you up? I really don't understand why an open world exploration game tells you to your face not to explore, to follow instead a fucking straight line after which the lesson of do not go there awaits? I just don't get it.
I don't get it.
I understand that Elden Ring wants to make it clear where it is you have to go so that the player who wants to advance has control and can choose to advance instead of getting lost in the open world against their will. But this had very simple solutions. For starters, Margit himself could tell you with that great voice actor he has, who says tarnished as if spitting at you because for him it's an insult. Margit actually says to you, put these foolish ambitions to rest, when he could just as well say, cocky art thou not, coming here unprepared, or tell you, thou art weak, tarnished, ghost away. And it would become very clear to you because the boss would be telling you that you're not ready and to go the fuck away. It's Perhaps a bit out of character for him to tell you this, like the character does not want you to get stronger and beat him, but instead to discourage you to try, but I don't know, I don't think my suggestions are too bad. If you disagree and don't like them, don't worry, I have more ideas. Your waifu talks, right? She could tell you that she suggests you to go to the castle, but that it's a very dangerous place and she recommends you to explore and go well prepared. She could appear after the 5th fail attempt against Margit, and she actually does so in the game, and tell you very directly that he's too powerful an enemy, maybe even enrich the character's lore and give you a direct clue about the object that binds him to the ground and where to find it. Even if it means telling you that there are weaker enemies than Margit that you could fight, which is something that you probably don't know, that you don't need to fight the three-faced asshole. Tell you that for God's sake, you're under-leveled, it's not the time to fight this bugger yet. It's just, the game knows it's not the time to boogie with Margit and it still encourages you to boogie with Margit. And it's great that the player can do whatever the hell they want and defeat Margit early, but part of doing whatever the hell you want implies having enough information to do whatever the hell you want. But here's the problem with information: when you want to convey it to someone else, you need to communicate to them. And Miyazaki's philosophy on communication is that of Homer Simpson.
The problem is communication. Too much communication.
It is for this reason that I think a very specific thing. I am about to speak a sentence that will change your fucking life. A sentence that not only will you not expect it, but that will sound as alien as the extraterrestrial life that Pinocchio's nose reached in the previous metaphor. A phrase that is going to catch you so unprepared that you would have preferred me to cut this interminable introduction with a ring the bell joke, but I'm not going to. Instead, I'm going to pronounce the aforementioned phrase. Are you ready? Here it goes. Hidetaka Miyazaki's games remind me of Johann Sebastian Bach's music. Subscribe, champ. If you take a piano score from the last 250 years, the most normal thing is that apart from the notes on the staves, on the pentagrams, yes, I am serious, did you think it was a fucking joke? You would find indications on how the piece in question should be interpreted. For example, Claude Debussy left abundant annotations in his scores indicating the tempo, the intensity, both emotional and volume, whether he wants it forte or piano, how flexible or rigid he wants you to be with the rhythm, how soft, sweet, heroic, emotional he wants a particular excerpt. Of course, there is room for interpretation, and one could argue whether the performer's view has the right to take precedence over the composer's, which in fact I had written a paragraph on interpretation versus composer's intent in classical music, but it has so little to do with Elden Ring that I have removed it. The important thing is that even if there is room for interpretation, some authors are very clear about what they want and communicate it to you with words in their work, while fucking Johann Sebastian Bach doesn't communicate shit to you, and you have to do fucking archaeology studying the traditions of Baroque music in 18th century Germany, only to have another musical archaeologist come along and tell you that you don't know shit, that your assumption is only correct for like the first half of the century. But, and here's the point, if Bach had put some fucking words on his sheets, if he had communicated what was the right way to play his music, we could play it right without doing archaeology and guesswork. I firmly believe that there is a right way to play Bach, whether that's my way or not, but I'm not so sure that Hidetaka Miyazaki has a right way to play his games when he designs them. Although I do believe I have a theory, that they are designed with the single player that doesn't summon in mind. On the one hand, the company's previous game is Sekiro, an action title with very few resources to facilitate combat beyond get good. The way in which Elden Ring's difficulty is most similar to Sekiro, that is, the way in which the difficulty is most consistent among the company's games, is to play without summoning and without items beyond weapon of choice and shield. But on the other hand, precisely Souls games have a lot of items beyond weapon of choice and shields, a lot of mechanics like the multiplayer mode that are there for a reason, right? A less skilled player, or one who simply wants to engage with the dozens of mechanics these games offer, can use them to, as I mentioned in a script I've written but probably won't publish about Demon's Souls, defeat the boss before going through the fog door. This could be one of my favorite things about Souls, using all the tools the game gives you to solve its problems. With thorough exploration and multiplayer mode, you can make the experience of these games quite easy, and it's the main reason why I don't advocate for easy easy mode in this saga. It already has it. It's called Magic Build, and it's also called Summoning. There is a sector of the community, however, that fervently defends that that's not the right way to play, you're not a real gamer, give me back your gamer ID. The question is it though? Are you sure that's not the right way to play the way Miyazaki had in mind? One of these real gamers might answer me that it doesn't matter what Miyazaki wants, the right way to play is without summoning and without items, period. But of course, you ask this same person what he thinks of the easy mode and how dare you spit on the vision of the author, of the man Hidetaka Miyazaki himself? What right do you have to tell Velázquez how to paint his pictures? Do you tell Katsuhiko Hokusai that the Great Way has too much water in it? No! Miyazaki's vision should be respected, unless I wanna make Anas look challenged and completely ignore his vision. Say again, Miyazaki, a massive festival full of NPCs who wanna participate in the big battle against Radan? How about beating him alone like I've been doing against absolutely every boss in the series? Of course, I'll honor your vision by doing whatever the hell I want. A priori, judging by the fact that From's games have an online component without which you can't discover hidden walls and areas, NPC questline endings, and so on, it would seem that Miyazaki's vision is to use those fucking mechanics, which would turn assholes like me who don't use them into people who are making their own self-imposed challenge, their own Nuzlocke. What little I've gleaned from his interviews would seem to suggest that the creator of the saga wants people to ask for and offer help via co-op, but I don't know if as a rule or as an exception, as in a particular boss that gives you a lot of trouble. I wish Miyazaki would make all this clear within his games, like titles like Darkest Dungeon or Celeste do, that tell you, hey, this is the game we wanted to make. We know it's very difficult, but it's because we want an intense feeling of accomplishment when you complete it. On the other hand, we are also aware that each person is different, and that's why we open up these options for you in case you need them. I had a line here in the script about recommending the game with all these mechanics that make it easier, but as I'll discuss later, it's true that they make the game so much easier that your experience varies a lot and it almost becomes another game. Although I have to admit that the few instances I engaged with the crafting, Pokemons, and playing with friends and strangers in co-op mode, I quite enjoyed it. Ironically, I've enjoyed the game quite a bit less when I've gotten into PvP and invaded or been invaded. Please remember, each and every one of these words was written at release in March 2022. It is not an adequate description of the state of the meta, but a time capsule of how bad the PvP experience was at release. Enjoy. And ring the bell, would you? Elden Ring's online system is the most complex and at the same time the one that works best of the saga, and this comes from someone who has interacted very little with the online part of this saga. You can leave your mark to invite other players to fight duels with you, either in a specific place or in Marika's online status in the surrounding area. Encounters of these styles duels are the ones I've enjoyed the most by far, although they would seem not to be the goal of Miyazaki, who supposedly sees PvP as a story generator in an interview I saw somewhere but I can't find now, so take it with a pinch of salt. The norm in duels, rather than receiving a story, is to receive an honorable duel, which I have found very enjoyable, as I have won the vast majority with my insanity build, which perhaps it was a bit cheesy in hindsight. The only stories I have been able to find in those duels are the one about the asshole who practically one-shot me with an anchor while I was waving at him, and the one about the couple of boyfriends who summoned me to 2v1 me, and I won anyway. This happened more than once or twice, and the conclusion of these two stories is that the fucking community of this game at release sucked. Of course, you can't judge so many millions of people by what a couple of bastards do, but I'm sure you'll agree with me when we talk about the fucking invasions. In previous games of the saga, you had two states: closed to invasions and cooperations, and open. Normally, open gave you some kind of benefit, such as more max HP in all souls except one, and not looking like shit as an add-on. However, they consumed a very limited item: Stone of Ephemeral Eyes, Humanity, effigies, or embers. In Elden Ring, this works differently. To summon, you need a limited but so easily craftable and obtainable item that you will finish the game with dozens if not hundreds of them. Through these items you can seek out duels, engage in jolly cooperation, or open your world to invasions and attract them through the tongue, a wonderful item that no one in all my invasions used. Me, myself, and I, on the other hand, yes, it was fun to receive invasions, especially when I was feeling strong and I got a little bored of the basic enemies. A player encounter helped spice things up a bit. When they didn't act like little bitches, of course. But not many people use their tongue. What's more common is for an invader to find a couple of boyfriends or even a threesome. Guys these days so liberal. I kinda see the sense of this decision. A player who is having problems with the game, the last thing they want is that a fucking rando come to ruin their life, so it makes sense to only invade them if they invite a cooperator. However, this means that the invader will always be at a disadvantage of at least 2 or even 3v1, which encourages the invader to use the scenario and enemies to their advantage to rebalance the scales. As if this were not enough to rub salt in the wound, Elden Ring rewards a fucking rune arc, one of the most valuable items in the game, which can get you 40 levels just like that to an invader who defeats their host, while the rest of PvP fights ends with the shitty price of these, of which you already have hundreds. This encourages even more the invader to use all means at their disposal to obtain the so valuable victory, generating more disgusting and embarrassing encounters. These are the two schools of PvP. The sons of bitches who wait for you to be on stairs, snipe with long distance weapons and hide behind enemies to kill you using any means at their disposal and no honor whatsoever, and the honorable gladiators who duel. Ex-YouTuber Matthew Matosis complained about the latter and said that PvP had to resemble the former, but I personally find that culture disgusting, and it's a shame that Elden Ring encourages it. Yeah, but it already happened in Dark Souls 3. Yeah, well, I don't care. I don't like the end result at all. The PvP in this game sucks. It definitely sucked at release and probably keeps sucking today. The host gank their invaders 2 or 3v1 and the invaders are as big of a piece of shit. Frankly, they deserve each other. I got off this train never to come back. The only positive stories I've had with invasions are the one of a player I invaded while his friend was AFK, I guess in the bathroom, and they made the emote of throwing themselves off the floor to cry in fetal position, and I left them alone because I felt sorry for them. On the one about the friend I was playing with who thought we had been invaded by an NPC and got a pleasant surprise.
¡Hijo de puta! ¡Dios! ¡Es un player! ¡Es un player! ¡Es un player! ¡Es un player! ¡Es un player!
Negative stories, however, I have many, most of them as interesting as player camped for several minutes in a row in a strategic area protected by enemies, or player killed me with 2 pyromancies while climbing stairs. But the most common online story of this game at release was undoubtedly, "Wow, player uses magic katana, how original, where did you get the idea? Have you thought of starring in your own anime?" Fucking katanas come in more than one variety. You have them focused on bleeding, you have magic ones which also have bleeding, and you have the katana with what is literally the most powerful, unfair and bullshit attack in the whole fucking saga. 99% of the community as of March 2022 was using these builds, and the truth is that it was such a delight to have the same combat over and over again. Thank you, Elden Ring community. At least I really enjoyed killing the vast majority of the fucking magic katana users I faced. See, I hate the fucking Elden Ring base game, but I hate the community much more, specifically the PvP campers and scumbags, but in a close second place with another special corner in hell just for them. The subset of the Souls community that I hate the most after the fucking campers pieces of shit are the elitist. I've mentioned this before, so I'll keep it short. The right way to play any video game is to have fun, but for these people that's not enough. Your value as a person, or minimum as a gamer, depends on how hard you make your video games, especially if they are called Dark Souls. I've played Elden Ring and the rest of the saga mostly without summoning, but I have no interest in invalidating the experiences of others. I've beaten all the main bosses by myself, and for some optional ones I forgot I had to prove something to someone, and instead I had a good time with the friend I mentioned earlier. Being an open world game with tons of possibilities at your fingertips, any given battle is as hard as you want it to be, mainly because you can go away to grind and come back with triple the levels and triple the boyfriends. However, considering the difficulty of the final bosses for which you couldn't grind, that Sekiro had a similar difficulty to what you get by not summoning in this game, my own judgment that most players who consider themselves fans have played the same way I have, and that I believe the game was originally designed with this experience in mind, I'm gonna talk about the game's difficulty, ignoring all these accessibility mechanics exist, just like I ignore all the elitist assholes who make clowns of themselves in the comments of this video. Combat in Souls games is simpler than these elitists would like to admit. If it's a basic enemy, keep the shield up, and if you're feeling particularly spicy, maybe parry. If it's a boss, throw the shield away. way, it's not gonna do you any good, champ. A light armor and they see me rolling. In this way, bosses have this rhythm, this dynamic of I hit, you hit, I hit, you hit. Many fans argue that Souls are difficult but fair games, in part, I imagine, because of this. Elden Ring, however, decided that if it followed the same philosophy, it couldn't kill you. Over on Souls players, Slayer of Demons, champion of dodge rolls. So instead of attacking once, Elden Ring's bosses attack on average 5 times, sometimes 3 times, sometimes 10. Shit was fair before, but is it fair now? I certainly don't think so. Something that I don't believe either is something I've heard and I think it's nonsense, which is Elden Ring is the easiest and most accessible game of the Souls saga, ideal for beginners. The accessible I understand and share, as this game gives you more tools than ever to deal with its problems, but the easy and ideal for beginners part is at least a phrase with many nuances. If you haven't played the previous Souls games, I frankly believe that you won't be able to complete the game without a super pro friend to carry you through the game, and come on, if we're talking about doing it without Pokemons or summoning, don't even bother. Let's compare a couple of bosses from the first Soulses and Elden Ring. Let's make the fairest comparisons possible. This is the Vanguard.
The Vanguard?
The first boss of the first game of the saga, Demon Souls. The Vanguard demon hits like a truck, and if you're unlucky enough to get caught with your shield up, he'll one-shot you. But apart from that, I wouldn't say he's impossible, far from it. Vanguard is such a calm boss, matter of fact I believe you can beat it without rolling, just casually strolling to avoid his attacks. The only way he can kill you is because of how small the arena is, how limited your healing items are, that you have enough to heal one hit at most, that the camera can go bananas and impede your vision, or because debris jumps out and impedes your vision. Without those factors in, this boss, which is designed to kill you, to explicitly kill you and send you to the Nexus, would be unable to do it. I mean, look at him, if you don't see his attacks coming, it's because you're blind, because even with severe farsightedness, you can clearly distinguish that he is about to play the part of a drunken father and give you a hell of a smack. Ah, as in singular, perchance 2 hits at most, not 30,000, unlike the one in charge of killing you in Elden Ring, his tutorial boss, quote-unquote. I can't even analyze it. I don't know how many different combos it has, and for most of them it's hard for me to count the number of attacks because I don't know when one combo ends and the next one begins. Pretty cool boss, don't you think, Miyazaki? I've seen people beating it, but only by sniping it from a distance with a bow, cosplaying as Genichiro Ashina, am I right, fellas? Very good luck besting this fucker at the beginning of the game without Estus, especially because at release you could encounter this bug in which the boss decided that it killed you when it saw fit, thus ending the battle. No attacks involved. For our next comparison, I'm going to switch games, because if I didn't, I would compare Margit with the freaking Phalanx, a sad fellow that has not killed me ever in any of my playthroughs, and that, like Margit, has a weakness in the form of an item which you can exploit and make the battle easier. It is known that the Phalanx can be killed in 2 seconds if you throw firebombs at it. No, let's be more generous and take Dark Souls 1 for the next comparison, although we could perfectly take Dark Souls 2 and compare Margit with the giant that can barely avoid shitting himself and rips off his own arm to save you the trouble of killing him. Ironically, the fire giant is inspired by this very thing. The next comparison will be between the first story bosses of both Elden Ring with Margit and Dark Souls 1 with the Taurus demon. Both bosses against which the player fights after having played a little and become familiar with the controls. So they should already know what they're doing, but still early in the game, being the first real boss apart from the tutorial one. Both Taurus and Margit have an exploit that the player can abuse to make the fight easier, and I'm not talking about Taurus reenacting this meme.
I've fallen, and I can't get up!
Which also makes the encounter easier since Margit is not an idiot and will never fall off the edge. Well, actually he cheats to not fall off. Taurus has a number of single attacks he can throw at you that are relatively easy to dodge, though some deal residual damage even when he misses them. You can have up to 10 Estus to revert your mistakes, though it would be reasonable to have lost some of them during your long walk from the bonfire. His arena is narrower, but that's only if you decide to fight him there, because if you're sharp sharp, or if the crossbowmen behind you land a quick scope or 2, or 3 or 4, you fucking done, mate! You'll see that you can go up some stairs and either win the fight by plunging attacking Taurus over and over again without him doing anything to stop you, or you can beat Taurus the normal way in a much more open space. The most important thing is the movement patterns of the boss's attacks. I'm gonna let the fight play for a few seconds so you can see the difficulty level of the fight and tell me how hard Elden Ring is compared to this. Okay, I think the gameplay speaks for itself. Margit, apart from not being able to fall down and having a trick to weaken him, but that you can't spam him to death without him being able to defend himself like Taurus, he hits like a truck, not unlike the demon. The problem with Margit is that he has very few attacks that are just a single attack. Most of Margit's offensive options are combos of at least 2 attacks. Margit has 2 phases, and in the second one he can dish out 5-hit combos without any problem, and the joke of it all is that he can decide to not return to neutral and instead land a couple more dagger slices. Because yeah, fuck you, he doesn't feel like resting and letting you attack him. This was okay in Sekiro because avoiding enemy attacks meant dealing posture damage to the boss, but here in Elden Ring, if you've just dodged the 11 attacks in a row, you now need to be close enough to him and have enough stamina to do so and reliably dodge another 11 attacks or get the fuck away. And your reward for all this would be to hit him once, twice if you carry very fast weapons and you wanna risk him dealing more than half your max HP in one attack. Be careful that this more than half is not almost all of your health, because if you are careless while you are healing, he can throw a couple daggers which can not only interrupt your healing but kill you easily if you had little health left. And this is all assuming you didn't spend all your level ups in life at the beginning of the game, which is what you should objectively be doing, and it's not even remotely open to discussion from an optimization standpoint. Play however the fuck you want, of course. The problem with this thing I mentioned about the boss cancelling the rest periods and linking 2 combos in a row is that from now on you can't be sure. You can't punish an attack that might lead to another combo. If you wanna be safe, you have to punish only those attacks that never lead to a follow-up, which in cases of bosses like Malenia results in very long fights in which you wait for a very long time for the boss to let you attack once. This, sometimes I don't feel like stopping attacking and for you to take your turn, although I find it funny when Sans Undertale does it. It's very unfair to my eyes, because you don't have the luxury of changing your mind and decide that it's not the boss's turn to play. The closest thing you have to this are the boss posture breaks, which works like in Sekiro as mentioned before, where if you land a lot of heavy attacks in a row on a boss and the boss feels like it because there are times when they tank through it for some reason, you'll knock them down and land a critical hit. I've already mentioned this, but what I haven't mentioned is how you break those postures, the playstyle this encourages, and that's precisely the most interesting part of Elden Ring's combat. When it comes to breaking a boss's posture, you have 4.5 options: parries, counterattacks, charged heavy strikes, heavy jump attacks, and the chat's version, dual jump attacks with berserks, greatswords, which are the true meta of the game, and I discovered it far too late, unfortunately. We'll talk about them later. Regarding the parry, From Software has destroyed it. Please do it for me, don't even consider trying a single parry on anything other than a spell in Elden Ring. You're gonna lose stamina and take the hit. In previous Dark Souls games you had a very generous window to parry, so much so that you could trust that you would get the parry. That is, the enemy would launch their attack and there were several frames during which if you hit the parry button, your character would deflect the attack with their shield. In Elden Ring, besides having attacks that can't be parried, all the attacks that can be parried require an accuracy of about 1 fucking frame, so most of the time you'll miss it and you'll eat shit. Die-hard Miyazaki fans will defend their god and reply that this is the ideal version of the parry, but that's implying that their god fucked up every single of the Souls' parries, because I'll be damned if it wasn't easy as hell landing parries in those games, especially Bloodborne. Miyazaki and the team have so heavily nerfed parries because I imagine they'd see them as too consistent and too strong an option to dispatch enemies. Just look at Gwyn. But it's a bit overkill in Elden Ring because bosses already deal with how abusable the parry was by requiring 2 or more parries to break their posture. The problem with them nerfing knocking the parries for being too strong is that they have added a number of options that are just as strong as the parries, only they require much less skill and are therefore more broken. The first and most obvious of this is the shield counterattack. That is, if your finger happens to be pressing the defense button when you receive an attack, you will block that attack, taking much less damage or none at all. If you have stamina left, you can hit the heavy attack button to deliver a devastating blow that will devour the enemy's stance like a kid with a chocolate sandwich after school. With 4 or 5 of these hits, you can take down most bosses, especially if you wear the ring that reinforces these counterattacks. And the problem with them is that they don't require any skill or risk to execute. You hit R2 until you win with no timing whatsoever. I'm glad that shields as a playstyle are now more viable than ever, but it's just that parries used to perform that function and were more fun to execute. And the worst thing is that you didn't need to choose between one or the other either, especially since counterattacks go better with the thicker shields which can't parry by default. The next new tool to reduce enemies' stances is the charged heavy attack. This was already in Dark Souls 3, but I'm not sure if it did more stance damage or more damage in general. Here in Elden Ring it's become crystal clear to me that if you get to charge these attacks on bosses between their combos, you'll knock them to the ground before they can say Stone of Ephemeral Eyes. These charged attacks are really cool because, unlike counterattacks, the former require more skill than it may seem at first glance. That is, the window between attacks is usually just big enough for one of these charged attacks to land, without also getting hit yourself. It reminds me a lot of Monster Hunter's Greatsword, which requires you to really squeeze in that slow swing between bosses' attacks, which encourages both in Capcom's game and From's that you learned the boss's movesets perfectly. However, if that idea doesn't appeal to you, don't worry, Elden Ring has you covered. I present to you the jump attack. Sekiro's jump is not only for platforming and to make you feel less tied to the ground, but it is monstrous in combat. So much so that if you go with a heavy weapon, you shouldn't even touch the ground nor the light attack button, which was what you had to do in previous titles, the R1 spam as the community called it. What you have to do with heavy weapons, as I mentioned, is go for the posture break, and for that the jump attacks come really in handy, because they deal almost as much posture damage as the charged ones but don't require as much commitment. While the charged heavy attacks wanted you to get married and sign the mortgage of a house by donating a couple of kidneys as collateral to the bank, the jump attacks don't even want you to call them the next morning. You can move around while attacking, which can save you from more than one predicament, especially since you can occasionally dodge attacks that were at ground level. I have to give it to Elden Ring, most of the times the hitboxes are pristine. Very rarely will you eat an attack that doesn't physically connect with your character's model, and that deserves praise. The pristine hitboxes, along with the saturative combat style of going for posture breaking with charged and jumping attacks, are to me such good additions to Souls' combat that I can't even imagine the formula without them anymore. It's kind of tame. A wonderful system that I wish would have been accompanied by less aggressive and unfair bosses, but it's really cool given precisely how fucking unfair they are to shove them to the ground and make them eat shit. It's cool that this style of gameplay is like in Sekiro when the opponent is at full health, but if you wanna go for a stance you have to be super aggressive and not give the boss any respite. When you land heavy attacks on the enemy, you have to keep landing them in a very short interval of times or the boss's guard will reset and they won't fall to the ground, which incentivizes a super aggressive and intense combat style of non-stop aggression all the time, even when you're just at death's door and need to heal, but it's just that continuing the aggression now that the boss is about to fall is what's in your best interest. You'll heal later while they get up from the beating they are now taking. It happened to me especially at the end of the game when I adopted that playstyle, that I felt that I was on equal terms with the boss. It's really cool, this alternative playstyle to the methodical one of taking the boss's life little by little, as it was cool in Sekiro, because it puts the control of the combat and its rhythm in your hands. This frenetic rhythm that I chose, this festival of dodges and jump attacks, can be so enjoyable that I insist I can't imagine this combat system without it. While on the air I recommend heavy attacks always, I can only think of one reason to choose light attacks after lifting your feet off the ground, and that is if you carry two heavy weapons, one in each hand, dual wielding thanks Tanimura, and you want to attack with both of them to break a lot of stance and do double damage, spending the same stamina. Really, the most difficult boss I've ever played in any video game had to come and teach me that with that build you might beat the game, but you're not gonna beat me. Change it. We'll talk about Malenia in a jiffy. We were supposed to be comparing Margit with the Taurus demon. In case it wasn't clear that Margit is infinitely more difficult, the punches that the Fellowman throws are not even half normal for the level at which you fight him if you trusted the game and came here right from the start. And 90% of them are designed to punish you if you press the roll button by instinct instead of having memorized how long it takes for the motherfucker to launch each attack. But maybe the worst thing, not only of Margit but all the whole fucking game, is that after you eat the first blow, if you press the roll button twice out of panic, the game stores the second roll in a buffer and executes it several seconds later as soon as you get up, taking you straight to an attack designed to punish that kind of rolls, even when you didn't want to do it. In a game where the bosses punish these kinds of rolls and kill you, you can't have an input buffering of so many seconds. It's so cruel and unfair. It was bullshit enough in Demon's Souls 13 years ago, but here is a criminal offense. Anyway, the last comparison of Margit with Taurus that I want to make is that I find fighting Elden Ring's bosses a much more fun endeavor than the homogeneous activity in the Dark Souls series. Although in my first playthrough I had a terrible time because I didn't know the meta of the jump attacks. As soon as I figured it out and adapted, I discovered a combat that, although it still frustrates me because I have very little patience and frustration tolerance for these kinds of bullshit games, it is infinitely more fun than the combat, also frustrating and much slower, of Souls. So yeah, to drive this point home, not only Taurus Demon is easier than the Fell Omen, but all the bosses in Souls are much calmer than in Elden Ring, and for proof, the infamous Godskin duo and how Ornstein and Smog didn't turn into Sonic the freaking Hedgehog and started spinning through the map and didn't throw pyromancies at you to keep you from healing. I understand that people say that Elden Ring is accessible because you also have many tools to use in your favor, which is true, but the difficulty of the bosses themselves, especially if you don't have a tank build, it's fucking crazy. It's completely unacceptable that those of us with tank builds get one-shot or two-shot not just by bosses but by fucking generic enemies. I believe it was a Video Game Donkey who summed it up pretty well. The guy who balances the game didn't come to work a single day of Elden Ring's development. To give another example, look at the Dancer in Dark Souls 3, which is one of the most infamous bosses of the saga, but in the first phase she spends a lot of time in neutral doing mostly nothing while you hit her, just walking around. And then she waddles away, waddle waddle, until the very next phase, bum 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 ba-dum. But during the first phase, she almost exclusively does one-hit combos, and many of her attacks you don't even have to roll to dodge them, and you can JoJo meme her and be super aggressive if you know the combat and play it well. From Software is the most sadistic game dev I know, but as far as Elden Ring is concerned, they've gone too far with how aggressive the enemies are and the absurd amount of damage they deal, resulting in a really fucked up experience if you don't understand the mechanics of the posture. Because, at least if you play with heavy weapons, again, if you press the light attack button, you are playing wrong. If you touch the ground and stop jumping, you are playing wrong. Elden Ring has changed the rules of melee combat, and whoever doesn't want to adapt is going to have a hard time, again sans Undertale style. For example, a YouTuber specialized in Souls, the Democracy, used heavy weapons. In fact, the exact weapon I wielded, the Tree Sentinel Halberd, and I haven't seen him jump even once in any of his videos. The poor bastard had made the game much more difficult without realizing. Speaking of difficulty, and concluding this section, allow me to say a few words about each main boss in the game. Godred has my favorite voice actor. The scream he makes and the thing are really cool, as well as the design with all the hands he has crafted on his body. Originally, underleveled as I was, I didn't think I could beat him. I thought it was impossible, but after a lot of headbutting, he's ended up being one of the easiest bosses in the game. I don't say this as an insult, the combat is still cool. For me, there is very little correlation between how difficult or easy a combat is and how well done and fun it is. Renala is much less fun, but she does have an interesting concept going on. The clone thing, where one of them is the one you have to hit and you identify her because she's the most aggressive, was already done with the Royal Rat Vanguard, the Deacons of the Deep, the Sage Crystal, and most importantly the Full Sidle. But that last fight is one of my favorites in Demon's Souls. The problem I had with Renala Phase 1 is those chandeliers that fall from the ceiling that, at least to my character who refused to level up health, they just one-shot me. The tank build ended up happening because I was tired of getting one-shot. Once you learn it, you know that droplets of oil signify that you have to get the hell out, but to learn it, you have to eat it at least once, and it's not cool that the learning process consists of a one-shot, especially because with this boss, From decided not to use the wonderful mechanic of Marika's statues, which serve as checkpoints only to respawn and not teleport, and whose function is to save you the trouble of walking a long way back from the bonfire. Phase 2 of Renala is spectacular, like Queen Marika, in a more or less similar scenario, with the moon and stars in the background and the water under your feet soaking them, splashing and trailing behind you. Just just like the water in the previously released Pokemon Arceus, am I right, fellas? Her Kamehameha can be dangerous if you get caught by surprise, as is the dragon boss she can summon, reminiscent of Elana the Squalid Queen from the Dark Souls 2 DLC. These dragons, by the way, I'm glad that they are some of them, but it's true that along with the Asylum demons, which have put on a new hat and don't fool nobody, are repeated and recycled to death, and it's just that every dragon is the same and not the most engaging and the difficult fights, although some attacks can one-shot you. Returning to Renala, another good thing about her Phase 2 is that she captures very well the essence of being a mage, both in Dark Souls and games like Dungeons & Dragons. You deal a lot of damage, but the slightest breeze of air means your death. It's kinda like Mr. Burns. Next comes Radahn, my favorite boss of the game and quite high in the saga actually. I fought this motherfucker at a low level and he tore me apart. I've got a feeling it's meant to be fought at that level, but summoning a dozen NPCs since you're in a battle festival and everyone wants to participate. Considering this, the fight against Radahn is even more special, and I like it a lot because besides being a spectacular fight, it's just that, very special. I mean, in the second phase the guy throws a fucking meteor at you and then you realize that he was the meteor, and then he puts a bunch of asteroids to orbit around him, not to mention the first phase where he reels you with arrows. You can play Radahn accompanied, alone, on horseback, or however you want. You always have a spectacular combat. The one I'm familiar with is a spectacular hand-to-hand confrontation, mano a mano. I enjoyed it a lot, what can I say, and everything that is not strictly part of this battle I like even more. I like that this giant mastered the art of gravity as to not weigh down his poor scrawny horse. I like my misunderstood version of the lore, in which along came Malenia with her scarlet rod determined to turn all the lands between into the desolate setting of another Dark Souls or The Last of Us, when Chad Radahn came along, tanked her and turned hollow in the process, sacrificing himself to save the world. I do believe I couldn't be further from the truth, but I prefer believing Radahn to be the good guy and Malenia the villain. Fuck Malenia. If you inflict a scarlet rot on the general, the plague he fought against, you deal so much damage that you almost end the combat then and there, which is a hell of a detail and one of the things I like most about these games, when the lore and gameplay are intertwined ludonarrative consonants. I liked Radahn so much that I had his armor made and used it throughout the game. I know, not the most original idea, as it is by far one of the best and most popular amongst the fandom. I don't know if it's because of the stats, the aesthetics, or because they share my affection for its owner. Before equipping this armor, however, I had to deal with Pretor Rykard, who decided to imitate Renala and repeat a boss fight that was already done in Demon's Souls and then in Dark Souls 3 and emulate Bjorn and the Storm King, not requiring, that's a strong word, encouraging you to use a certain weapon that you will find in the arena itself. I have no complaints about Rykard beyond the absurdity of the incessant barrage of exploding skulls in his second phase. It's also not a fight I'm going to remember until the day I die, but I appreciate the spectacle and change of pace of not fighting a dude with a sword, which is precisely what Morgoth is, consisting of a remix of Margit's fight in which he does even longer combos. I think he holds the record of the saga if we exclude Malenia's waterfall dance, and is even more aggressive than before. Of course, the fight that was the hardest for me was the first one because I was criminally underleveled, and the second time I faced him prepared, to the point that I beat him first try. I insist that this I beat him first try is neither a boast nor a criticism. Precisely the bosses that I have killed on the first or second try, not the ones that have consumed days and nights of my time, are the ones that I have enjoyed the most by far. The fucking Frost Giant is somewhere in the middle. He took me a few tries for starters because finally From has created a giant enemy that actually fights back and tries to kill you, instead of letting you chop his legs off without putting up a fight. In fact, very good luck dodging his attacks. Mog has a little corner in hell reserved for him. His attacks are exaggeratedly delayed, minus a couple of ones that just ain't. What he also has is an attack that takes 3 or 4 restus from you, to which the attack label applies by miracle, as it can't be dodged, only mitigated by an item. But I thought true gamers didn't use items. Why is the existence of the item used to justify the boss by elitists when they condemned the use of items? Anyway, phase 2, just as a concept, was the greatest pain I'd ever suffered in any video game. Once again, repeat after me, class, until I met Malenia. Very good! Now really fucking bad, you cunt! Mog phase 2 comes all over the map. All his attacks deal extra fire damage that even if you block with your shield with 100% damage reduction, you eat the damage anyway, something he shares with Malenia, a strategy to punish you if you use the shield and thus encourage you to dodge. Many of Mog's attacks explode after finishing, and some of those that don't link with other combos, which translates into an armed robbery to your Estus that burns them in mere seconds if you don't dodge absolutely everything. The worst of this fight, the worst is everything, but this too, is that you cannot dodge absolutely everything because Mog is designed to hit you just when you eat the bleeding, so that if you are with your shield up about to block one of his attacks, the bleeding sparks off, takes you out of the blocking animation or even the rolling one, and you inevitably receive the attack and the bleed, which if you're not at maximum life, most likely it will kill you. I insist, the boss was so abusive that it had the title of most difficult I faced in any video game, especially because I insisted of fighting him at level 80, but then at 100 and 120 and it was still fucked up. I tried again later with dual jump attacks and it can be done. In fact, the combat can be very fun with that particular build, although he's still a bit of a cheeky bastard. Like I said, Mog was the toughest bastard I'd ever faced in any video game. And then Malenia came along and showed me how wrong I was and how much leeway From had to make a fight more fucked up and cruel. Turns out the trick is putting a Sekiro boss in a game without Sekiro's parries, who would have thunk? Malenia would be a very simple boss if she didn't heal, for an equally simple reason. You can block her attacks with a shield very easily, and from there wrecking her through counterattacks and disintegrating each of her molecules is just a cakewalk. But Malenia heals. Facing her with a shield means losing Estus against a life bar that simply does not go down. In fact, if it could, it would go up, because she heals much more HP than the damage you deal to her. The most, let's call them reasonable, not to say fair, attacks consist of individual strikes with her katana, which can be dodged relatively easily and counterattacked. Malenia's most unfair attacks turn her into a hurricane of slashes who travels at 400 km per hour that, when it's over, if you do not know how to cheese and dodge that, you're either dead or she's healed a quarter of her life, and you have to drink 2 or 3 Estus Champ. The Sekiro combo I call this one, from the speed at which her slashes go and the distance they travel. This kick literally comes from Sekiro. Malenia has the same problem as Margit and other enemies in the game, that after certain combos she can decide that she doesn't feel like getting attacked by you and starts another combo instead. This achieves the same as before, that you can't afford to punish many of her attacks, so the fight, if you wanna play it safe, minimizing risks, consists of waiting for her to be kind enough to do the reasonable attacks, the punishable attacks, which is tremendously frustrating because it turns the fight into a casino roulette in which the coin is your time. But what really is tremendously frustrating is Malenia's flurry combo, the waterfall dance. I'm talking about what I've already labeled as the most unfair attack I've ever encountered in a video game. Malenia has a trigger which is about 75% max HP that activates her waterfall dance. Okay, let's stop this for a second. See what just happened. If you're in this position, you're dead. The only thing that could save you right now is a shield, but don't get overconfident either, because overconfidence is an insidious killer, and because Malenia could catch your back and one-shot you. If you manage to block the attack with a good shield, congratulations, you've healed Malenia to full. The fight starts again. Pray that the next time you lower her life she doesn't do the exact same thing again, so that you'll never win the fight. What has to happen for you to overcome her is that you learn to recognize when Malenia might be thinking of doing her shitty combo and you dedicate yourself to bait it. That is to say, to approach her at a prudent distance and then run away before she even jumps. If you start running just after the jump, I'm sorry, but it's one shot. What you have to do is, as soon as you hit her, run until the third wave of cats, turn around and have the finesse to twist slightly to the opposite side to the one she turns, because even at this point you are in danger of losing more than half life. Although, yeah, losing more than half life with the flurry combo is a win in my book. The most important lesson that Malenia taught me, as I already mentioned, is that you can't beat me with that build. And she was right. I tried with 200 weapon, 100 to spam charge attacks in heavy armor, to wear light armor medium, to spam jump attacks. I got out looking for a couple of rings that I found online. The joke was that, like the law of surprise of The Witcher, I had to face her when I least expected it, because it wasn't until I appeared before her with dual great swords for the the ha-has just to see what happened that I saw the light at the end of the tunnel. With the rings of jumping, stamina regeneration and extra defense, I was finally doing enough damage to Malenia to trade hits, so I could be aggressive from time to time and allow myself to make some mistakes. That's how Malenia is designed, by the way. Her only weakness is that during most of her attacks, at least the reasonable ones, Malenia doesn't have super armor and therefore any attack from you cancels her animations. Just as she attacks you incessantly and heals while she does it, you have to be very aggressive and shut her mouth with your own attacks until you get her on her knees. If you manage to do this soon, congratulations, you have activated the flurry combo. Run for your fucking life. If you dodge the flurry combo, you have earned the chance to fight and win that fight. Be mindful of which attacks can be punished, and if she uses them, punish them. Forget about healing if you've already hit her 3 times, because in 1 or 2 more you'll shove her prone, you'll have time to heal there. Another time when you have plenty of time to heal is during the beginning of the second phase. Yeah, kiddo, he has a second phase. Now she deals rot. The good thing about most of Elden Ring's second phases is that they retain some attacks from the first, so that if you're patient enough and wait for those attacks, you can take out more than one boss without learning the new ones. Specifically, Malenia's new attacks are all in the fuck you category, the unfair one, except this explosion, which is punishable. Especially here, if you see that Malenia is chilling, hit her for God's sake, don't let her get up. If Malenia misbehaves, run and pray that you run away in time and the fight is not instantly over. After a lot of trying, I ended up getting lucky with Malenia. She had a second phase in which she flew little and used her sword a lot, and I could capitalize with my great swords until she started doing one of her one-shot attacks, after which I saw it very clear. If I could take away that fraction of life she had left, I'd won the fight. I got in the middle of the rot and I made it, just barely alive. A pretty epic conclusion within how frustrating the fight had been. At the end, I didn't feel satisfaction. I felt relief because my sentence was finally over. I could continue and finish the fucking game. And then I went online and saw people fighting her alongside Ditto, the mimic Pokemon, before it was nerfed. What a beating she took! I just couldn't believe it. The fight had absolutely no resemblance to mine. This showed me how widely the difficulty of the game can vary, from the depths of the abyss or tutto buio dell'abisso to walk in the park. The last thing I want to do is criticize these players. That's what the game mechanics are for. But holy crap, what a difference. The Mimic was nerfed shortly after by From Software, but what they had not fixed at the time was the game crashing on my second playthrough, keeping me from playing the game anymore. Come again, Manet? A second playthrough? Yes, I had this line right here saying that I wasn't going to do another playthrough of dozens of hours to test the difficulty of the game, but I did just that. I was planning on summoning, but at the end I didn't need to. But before that, back to the thing about Pokemon's Ditto and co-op is that they again radically changed the gameplay experience, as I mentioned before. That is, compare the Godskin duo alone versus accompanied by 1 or 2 friends. The experiences have absolutely nothing to do with each other, just like summoning a Pokemon and using them as a tank to cast spells from behind, whether they one-shot the boss or not. I wasn't kidding before when I said that these games already have easy mode. For me it's so easy, in fact, that I don't feel comfortable using them, although I insist that I don't judge anybody. To each their own, let them play as they want. My experience with Elden Ring has been more frustrating than I can tolerate, but I didn't want to turn it into a walk in the park either, so I struggled a lot, completely ignoring a number of mechanics that seemed like a lot of fun, but make the game too easy for my personal taste. There are hardcore fans who want the ultimate challenge. For many others this is fucking insane, and the alternative is to scrap almost all of the challenge. Doing so is perfectly fine, mind you, I'm not judging anyone again. And yeah, it's true that the boss will still one-shot you even when accompanied. I myself have seen hosts that I tried to help being disintegrated by a single attack and said, man, I can't help you. If the boss kills you just by breathing near you, there's nothing I can do. But even though the enemies are still very aggressive and deal too much damage, their aggro is divided while the source of damage are multiplied. Pardon the chaotic structure of the script, this is just... I've given Elden Ring's difficulty a lot of thought, as having so many options makes it difficult to judge. For that reason I went through the game again to check how, with the knowledge I acquired in my previous run, I dealt with the enemies that gave me so much trouble the first time. For this experiment I decided to replicate my last build of dual heavy weapons, so I picked the Vagabond class and took out the Tree Sentinel on my second try. I did nothing else in the entire playthrough through bad jump attacks, and neither the horseman nor any other boss could do anything against it. Tremendously surprised, I put all my levels on vitality and went for Margit directly, as skeptical as to whether I would easily dispatch him, as in my previous playthrough it took me hours. Well, he went down too. It was significantly more complicated than the Sentinel, but still possible, likewise with Godric. Again, this style of play consists of trading attacks with the boss. In its worst moments it's a bit random and it's Lady Luck who decides the winner, but in its best moments, and I know I've already talked about this, but it's very important that I made clear how cool this style of combat is to me. It's a dance as tense as it's aggressive, in which you cannot afford to heal if you get hit. You must continue attacking the boss. You must keep attacking the boss, giving them no quarter, because every second you give them could take away your advantage, so you keep attacking until you throw them to the ground, where you get a free extra hit, and then the critical, the backstab, which you follow up with yet another jump attack, until it's essential that you heal or you have already lost the combo and there is no hurry. It's not just that I liked this style of combat more than any of the saga, except for Sekiro, because that system was spectacular and was based on the same posture bar mechanic thing. So yeah, I not only loved it, but it's spectacularly strong. I've been able to beat the game going almost exclusively to the legacy dungeons and rushing it without too much trouble. This trouble, when it ended up coming, was that I hadn't upgraded the Estus flask at all and I needed more healing.
I need healing.
Using this tool and throwing bosses to the ground while focusing all my levels on raising vitality and stamina to increase my armor, in strength I put only the minimum to carry the weapons, Elden Ring's difficulty has been reduced quite a bit. For some reason, bosses and the generic enemies kept one and two-shotting me despite my perfect tank build, but it was rarer. I honestly think I played the easiest melee version of the game, and this version is bearable. I still get frustrated, but bearable. Mind you, bearable as a base of the damage that a normal character should receive, not an optimized tank character with an insane amount of vitality and the best armor in the game at the time. I find the aforementioned one-shots absurd, completely unacceptable, and as I say, I also don't know how appropriate it is for me to judge Elden Ring's difficulty from my super optimal build perspective, since that won't be and hasn't been the experience of most players. But it's just that most players at release went with the fucking magic katana, so I don't know how much melee combat they engaged in. I do think it's fair to say I played without easy mode, but the right way, quote unquote. Played like this, the game has a difficulty that I find tolerable. However, it is not only that other players may not wanna play the right way and are going to be severely punished with 100% of the enemies taking 100% of their life in one hit, but for those who do want to adopt it, good luck. This correct way to play melee, the game didn't tell me. That is, it informed me that the jump attack existed, but it didn't tell me that it was a much more valid combat style than the usual one for heavy weapons. It didn't tell me how it was the only tool to put such aggressive bosses in their place. With this approach, I progressed through my second playthrough until I reached the end of the game. Assuming of course that the end of the game is a black screen post-Malekith instead of jumping to a cinematic. Yes, the game crashed on me shortly before the end and I can no longer play that save file. If this had happened to my main save file, I'd just delete the entire video and replace it with an hour and a half of me screaming, "Miyazaki, you son of a bitch!" Playing normally at release, the game just broke and you couldn't continue playing. Spectacular job from software. If I graded games on this channel, which I don't, bugs like this that make the game impossible to complete would make me subtract 2 or 3 points to the game. That's how serious it is to me. And subtract to this game, to Fallout New Vegas and every other game. So yeah, forget about this other save file, as it is an eternal black screen now. Let's go back to my original experience and then to the conclusions. Between some attempts of Malenia, I reached Ornstein and Smog 2 Electric Boogaloo, which are considered one of the worst bosses of the game and the saga, and not without good reason. What's the deal then? That these two motherfuckers, just like Malenia, had a right build to kill them with. I'm referring now to the shield and counter attack. If you turtle your way through them, these two motherfuckers are affordable. They don't have a lot of tools to deal with it, let's just say. If it wasn't for the fact that there is a correct way to defeat them, or if I hadn't figured it out, I would have found them very frustrating and boring, because having to wait for them to split up using the pillars is not only ridiculous, in the sense that you're literally taking advantage of their AI being much more A than I, but it's also a pain in the ass. Luckily, I found this convenient way to beat them, which taught me that most playstyles have their moments in the sun. Luckily, with strength build you have most of them at your disposal. Well, with strength builds and if you carry special weapons, because the normal ones require 500 billion upgrade stones, which are nowhere to be found for the massive amount you require. Exactly 24 of each type if you want a dual wield. And the ones that unlock the high level Titanite purchase are the Godskin fellas, so there's a very real chance you'll face them doing a hell of a lot less damage than you should, less damage than someone who used the weapons that are upgraded with stones that exist. On Malekith you can use the shield, but I recommend it more for the first phase. For the second phase I found jump attacks to be the most practical. As for the combat itself, there's not much I can say really. Second phase is a bit bullshit with all the jumping away, deciding that it's not your turn to play, but other than that, after Mog and Malenia, everything that I didn't kill first try I killed at second, so I didn't have much chance to see some of his moves. I was this close to killing him in my first try though. Placidusax is a bit of a joke to me. You stand on his ass and beat him to death. You'll see lights around you. Ignore them. If you get struck by too many lightning bolts in a row and the fires, you'll die. But if you're lucky and you don't get struck or he doesn't even try to do it, you'll win. It also disappears and one-shots you out of nowhere, which is even more immersive because From didn't put near any Marika statue. You know, those that are in the game exclusively so you don't waste your time. Well, here you do waste it, because if not, what is lost is your immersion. A spectacular combat. By the way, I was being sarcastic. After this, there was only a couple of bosses in my way. By the time I faced Torkel from Vinland Saga, I had already defeated Malenia, so this was not a combat, it was the call an ambulance, but not for me, meme. I did it first try and without breaking a sweat. Don't know, it didn't feel like he was equipped to deal with an aggressive and jumpy player. I have zero respect for him as a character. I can't stand rewarding your pet's loyalty by killing it. Did Radan do that with his horse? No, of course not, because Radan wasn't a little bitch who died in less than a minute. Get out of my way. So yeah, behind the last door is the blacksmith of the trailers that forged the Elden Ring, and I killed him on my second try. And I was this close in my first try. I've already told you, going for the enemy's stance, constant aggression is the meta. Yes, I had a high level by the time I reached Radagon, but it's not as if I used the farming exploit more than once or twice to test it. Everything else was playing the game organically. And even if I had gotten here with 25 less levels in strength and faith, it would have been quite the same. I would have dealt less damage, but the boss would have got on their knees at exactly the same time. The most important thing I had was the stamina to not stop attacking and to wear Radan's armor and take less damage per hit. Out of all of those silent men with a 100 weapon at the end of the game, those being King Alan, who was practically the only boss fight of the game against a humanoid, at least that fought back, Gwyn, who had some dramatic weight in the story and an artistic component with the blim blim blon, Mashandra, who had nothing but was not another regular sized dude with a sword, German the Hunter, who had the phrase "Tonight German joins the hunt," and also was optional, the Soul of Cinder, who had the best fucking fan service when it came to phase 2 and you heard again the blim blim blon. And in Sekiro, a smart part of the fight was against Genichiro, to whom you demonstrated again and again that he had no business being in that final battle, and you saw that the poor bastard wanted to protect his family legacy so hard that he lent his body for his grandfather to be reincarnated, I guess? Ishin was a dirty piece of shit and I have a little respect for him as a character, but precisely this makes him have some personality, makes me remember him. Radagon, on the other hand, I can't seem to bother. I mean, he has the twist that he's a blacksmith and not a swordsman, and visually he has this thing, he's not just a generic dude with a sword. No, it's not generic because Radagon is a hermaphrodite, unlike the other side of Marika. Yeah, look, I don't care. The boss fight I like is the second one. The Elden Beast is a very strange creature with a phallic head, which is what I like least about its design. What I like most is that the arena consists of a huge constellation full of Erdtrees with water soaking your feet like in Renala's combat. I'll mention it again, the water is cool and it moves and sounds. I know the water sounding thing seems a bit stupid to point out, but another studio wouldn't have bothered. Some of the beast's attacks are frustrating because it literally jumps 200,000 kilometers away and you can't punish it. But that's something I have written in my unreleased Sekiro script, that this is an artistic boss. It's not one where the enjoyment lies in the exchange of blows, but in the experience and how different it is the first time you encounter it. When I first faced the beast, I had no doubt it would be one of the most hated bosses for the fanbase, specifically the sector that replays these games time and time again. But for me personally, it was not only a very cool and original way to finish the game, but one of my favorite bosses in my first playthrough, which frankly left a bad taste in my mouth. Elden Ring is the definitive Dark Souls game in the sense that it has added a lot of mechanics, such as crafting, to fill the gap left by other Souls with a somewhat narrow gameplay, consisting of moving around levels fighting things. Elden Ring has added to the formula a massive open world, impressively well designed and full of details for a studio with no experience in open world games far as I know. Elden Ring has expanded both the formula of the series and its own individual elements, exploration with the open world and legacy dungeons, and combat with this alternative playstyle of over-the-top aggression to disintegrate the enemy's stance, an addition that makes me enjoy it so much more and that without it I'm going to have a hard time replaying the rest of the titles in the saga. But here's the thing, I don't wanna go back to the rest of the titles in the saga, not soon at least, because with this Elden Ring experience I lost my appetite. But wait, there is more. Not only have I lost the desire to play the game itself and the entire saga that came before it, but this made me rethink my own gamer identity. It may look like I'm joking as with the Johann Sebastian Bach's line, but unfortunately no and no.
No and a no.
What I mean now is that before Elden Ring, in my gamer resume I listed Souls Saga fan. It was not only part of my tastes, it was like part of my identity. The point is that to begin with, Souls Saga fan stopped being something cool and special in 2011 with Dark Souls 1. If you entered the saga later, as I did, let me tell you that you're not special, and neither am I. The Souls Saga is not a niche saga, it's a subcultural phenomenon that has changed the video game industry forever. It is in fact the opposite of a niche game. Just look at the dozen million units that Elden Ring sold only in the fortnight after its release. The main reason I no longer want Souls fan on my resume isn't how mainstream it is, it's that I just couldn't care less for the difficulty of these games, and it seems like such an intentional focus of the company, despite Miyazaki saying otherwise, that I no longer identify with their games or their design philosophy. Sekiro is so difficult that I partly hate it, and Elden Ring too. I hate those parts of those experiences, even when I like the exploration a lot. As part of this video, I've revisited for several hours the rest of the Souls saga, and while I was expecting games that were easier, less sadistic games than Elden Ring and Sekiro, I've found games that are just as sadistic and that fill me with a frustration and despair that I'm just not able to manage right now. I have no tolerance for this shit. I can perfectly understand why those who like the saga do so, as I've had my good moments with the combat and mostly everything else I love. And not just the exploration, the legacy dungeons and the like, but for example like the care the studio puts into their games and that they're not fucking live services, money-milking machines without any love or any soul, You get? What I can't do is lie to you and say that I finished Elden Ring with a good taste in my mouth. I don't know if I'll buy Elden Ring's DLC The Shadow of the Erdtree thing when it comes out, because although as I said in the beginning, I'm perfectly capable of appreciating the huge amount of great stuff in Elden Ring and the rest of the Souls games, but it's just... right now their approach to difficulty, it's just not for me. Enemies that reward you with so few souls and yet are so aggressive with their attacks, linking an absolutely absurd amount of these, coupled with the equally absurd amount of damage these attacks deal. This has led some players, myself included, to seek refuge in the tank build. If I'm taking this mass damage, it must be my fault, right? I must be playing wrong, I'll need more life and more defense. Well, even if in many occasions you will endure more hits, in many others playing with the perfect build, optimal tank, generic enemies who again drop an embarrassingly low amount of souls will still one-shot you, because getting one-shot in the beginning was not your mistake, not even From Software's mistake. It was the whole idea of the game, not a bug, but a feature. The whole idea of the game is Malenia one-shotting you, Mog taking half of your Estus flasks just because, most bosses cancelling the rest periods between combos to keep attacking you, because fuck you! The difficulty in Elden Ring, as much as Miyazaki says the opposite, is there exclusively to fuck around and piss the player, and I think it's wonderful that there are people who enjoy it and participate in this dynamic with From. I, for one, I'm not sure I wanna touch fucking Elden Ring again, not even with a stick the size of Pinocchio's nose that I described an hour ago. But again, apart from my personal gripe with it, it's still a great game. If you loved it, I encourage you to play it again. I am sincerely happy for you and for a AAA company who clearly has a vision for their game connecting with so many people, even if many people is not one of them. Yeah, I'm ending with that. Watch my latest video here, and I guess I'll see you around. Take care. See ya!